What age do you get to meet your biological mother for the first time?
21, 22. My adopted mother was very gracious because I said, I won't meet my biological mother without the permission of my adopted mother. She did all the work of raising me, all the hardships, she put up with all of my rambunctiousness in teenage years and drove me to hockey practice and, emptied her bank account to pay for our food and stuff. So I did not want her to feel like she was going to be left behind or forgotten about or replaced. And I asked her, would you be okay if I met her? And she said, yes, of course, because I won't always be here and I always want you to have a mother. And I thought that was a really incredible thing to do because it's such a big part of a mother's identity is that they are the mother of that child. But to have a love that's so much deeper than that personal identity or interest is something I'll always remember. It's one of the most gracious things I've ever seen.
I can see the emotion in your face as you say it.
Yeah.
It's still there.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about that in a while.
What beautiful people.
Yes, we're very blessed, and it's people like these that inspire me, that keep me going in this crazy world of politics.
So you get to meet your biological mother at 21, 22?
Yeah, around that.
Yeah. What does one say? What are the questions one needs to ask, if any?
I'm trying to remember. We went on a bit of a road trip from Ottawa to Montreal, and we just got to know each other. She had a lot of questions about how my life had been, and I had a lot of questions about our biological family, about her father, who was a really great man. I would go on to meet a great Irishman, and the circumstances that led to my my conception and birth. And I really came to understand her decision to put me up for adoption. And I've never been resentful for it at all. She was 16. She just lost her mother to a heart attack. She didn't have a lot of means, and she just made a selfless decision that we would have more opportunity if we were raised by someone else.
Did you ever learn anything about your biological father?
Yes. Yeah, he works at a concrete plant in British Columbia. And so I went and met him. He's a great father with children that he subsequently had and raised. And so he's a very good man as well. And my adoptive father is a teacher, and he gave me a lot of wonderful lessons, and I think is responsible for my way with words.
Marlene and Donald?
That's right.
So Marlene's your adoptive mother, Donald's your adoptive father. They divorced when you're 12 years old.
Yes, it would be around that time. I was in grade 5.
Very difficult time for parents to divorce. Very difficult time. I remember that period of life very, very clearly because I remember one day my parents coming to me and telling me that they didn't love each other anymore and that they were going to get a divorce. They didn't.
Okay.
But I remember which, I think did enough damage, but it was around that age. And I remember where I was stood in the house. I remember what I was wearing when they said that to me because it's earth-shattering.
It is, actually.
I can't unforget it. It was traumatizing.
Well, my dad told me, and he wanted to tell me alone. So we got into the car. He said he wanted to take me for a drive, and we drove to the local corner store, and we parked in the car, and he told me that there. But it is very traumatizing, and but at the same time, like, they were very, very good parents. So I don't judge them for how they ended up apart. We were very blessed. They gave me a great start in life. Even though they weren't together, they loved us very much, and they gave us all they could.
And Donald would eventually come out as gay.
That's right.
One would assume that he was dealing with the conflict of feelings.
Yes.
For much of the time.
He had been raised in a very devoutly French Catholic household, and that's why we have a French name. And before he got married, he'd even consider going into the priesthood, and he was a very devoutly Catholic person. He genuinely loved my mother, but obviously he wasn't programmed that way. He has a wonderful partner, and we're friends with, very close with him and his partner, Ross, right now.
Do you see how that's changed you as a man? As you've grown up, whether it's your perspective on what love and romance is or anything else?
I think that if everything just been, white picket fences and, totally predictable, and then I wouldn't be the kind of person I am today. I think it's also it's like you. Would you have been as successful as you are if you had a very easy childhood? I doubt it. I bet all the hardships that you had and the twists and turns that took you from Botswana to the United Kingdom and then onward probably gave you some superpower. And so I think it gave me the chance to understand that you don't judge people. You love them for who they are. My parents also taught me an important lesson that Shakespeare says, "To thine own self be true." My mother when she was a small baby, she was in a car accident and her fingers were burned off and she had horrible scars, horrible burns on her hand at the time. And as I got to my adolescence, I said to my dad, did it ever bother you when you started dating her that she had this injury? And he said, no, because it didn't bother her. She was totally at peace and she never hid it. It wasn't long after we met that I forgot it was even there. And the message that I took from that is, be yourself. Don't try to hide the scars. Scars are the trophies of survival. So those are some of the lessons that my mother and father taught me. And my dad was the same about who he was. He just lived his life unapologetically and openly, and he never apologized for who he was. And that has stayed with me.
When you speak of Marlene, you speak up with her with a great fondness and expression in your face that, I've sat here 600-700 times, so you get to see who matters most to people in their lives just by looking at their face. And she's clearly on the podium.
Yeah, she's a very feisty little lady, very short and very, very forceful. She taught me a lot about being, pugnacious and fighting for what you want and what you need in life. And and we argued a lot when I was a kid, and I think that maybe forged some of my current political argumentation as well. My wife is a big part of it as well. She's a very strong, feisty, intelligent lady with an incredible upbringing as well. She's a refugee from Venezuela and came with really nothing. And so she has this sort of MacGyver-like skill set to get anything done, no matter how difficult the logistics. So I've been very, very blessed with strong women around me.
At a very young age, it appears that you took a liking to politics. You mentioned hockey first, and Marlene taking you to hockey. I've found a couple of photos of you playing hockey, which I found to be quite interesting. But
yes.
But politics. When did politics come into your psyche?
I would have been kind of in my mid-teens. Well, I got into football, hurt my back in football, so I couldn't stay on the team. My mother had always gone to these sort of local conservative meetings, sometimes just bringing baked goods or attending a volunteer meeting. And I said, well, why don't you bring me to one of those? Because I'm bored out of my skull. And she did. This gives me meaning. This gives me purpose. I want to go and pursue this. So I started getting more and more involved. I got an internship, making almost no money, and I'm dressing up in a used suit and really threw myself fully into this mission.
One of the books that I realized you'd read at that time from some research is this book, Adam Smith, The Theory of Moral Sentiments.
Yes. So this book has to be accompanied by its more famous sister book, which is The Wealth of Nations, which that's the book that most people know Adam Smith for. They think of him as kind of the father of capitalism, because in 1776, he wrote this book which described what we now call the free market system. And this was a really revolutionary idea, because up until then we basically had various forms of feudalism.
What's that?
Where a small group of lords and knights and aristocrats control all the land, and the great masses do all the work. And so you called them serfs. They would do all the heavy labor, and then the lords of the manor would take all of the benefit. Along came the system of free enterprise that Adam Smith describes, which is basically, it has a very simple premise: voluntary exchange of work for wages, product for payment, and investment for interest. And that the economy, rather than being guided by the iron fist of the king or the state, is guided by the invisible hand of the free market. And this had been thought that this was crazy. How could the economy just sort of run itself? And the answer is through price signals. If the price of something goes up, people just automatically start making more of it. And if you need more workers to make that thing, well, you raise the wages. And all of a sudden, what do you know? The workers arrive. And this system is absolutely ingenious. Like, it's why when you go into a coffee shop and you buy your coffee, you say thank you. They don't say you're welcome. They say thank you, because they have something worth more to them than they had before, the money, and you have something worth more to you than you had before. And this voluntary exchange puts everyone on an equal scale. Even if you're a massive corporation, you want to sell something to a 15-year-old kid, you have to convince him that it's worth more than the cost. So everybody has to be better off in the exchange for it to occur. And that was how free enterprise formed. And it has led to a spectacular increase in the quality of living and the economic growth, 200-fold increase in economic growth in the free enterprise era versus the feudal era. So a lot of people thought Adam Smith is only interested in a system where people are out serving themselves, their self-interest. That's what they took from the statement in The Wealth of Nations, that it is not from the benevolence of the brewer, the baker, or the butcher that we get our meal, but from his own self-interest. But that was only half the story. The other half was in this book called The Theory of Moral Sentiments, in which he explains how self-interest overlaps with virtue. So what he said is that we have something called fellow feeling, which is to say we feel for the other person. And we feel good when someone else does good. It's why we explain that, people donate to charity, or they leave the door open for a stranger, or they might help an injured person on the street, because they feel bad when they see someone else, their fellow, suffering, and they feel good when they see him succeeding. And that's why it's called sentiments, because you feel these things. I saw this in my own son. He, for the first time, he got a little toy and he gave it to his sister. It was the first gift he'd ever given in his life. And he was so happy. Like, he literally ran in a big circle around the foyer of our residence and just laughing and screaming. It just made him so happy, happier than she was to even receive it. And this is the best of human nature, that his interest, his happiness was served by seeing his sister better off. And this is really laid out in some detail in The Theory of Moral Sentiments. And for me, it's like it brings together all of human nature in one place. Now, he's not naive. He does accept that there are bad, dark angels in our nature. But he gives the only plausible explanation that I have seen about how you intersect self-interest with altruism.
And how did that change your perspective and therefore, your policies and your career?
I have found that those who push a socialist ideology have a gross contradiction in their view of human nature. They say that human beings are wretched, self-interested, greedy when they're in the private, voluntary economy, but they're angels when they're in the governmental economy. And therefore, they argue that the government should just control everything, because then we have all these angels that will decide for us, decide what we get to, how our money is spent, what we're supposed to believe in the modern day, what kind of vehicles we drive, what we should think. But that is a huge contradiction. If man is not capable of deciding for himself, surely he's not capable of deciding for others. And I think the worst vices in human nature come out when there is too much power and concentrated in their hands. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. So my ideology is that we should disperse power, that it should be a bottom-up system with as much freedom and agency as humanly possible, that people should be free to choose for themselves, and that the purpose of the government is to do only those things people cannot do for themselves.
I guess if there's, socialists listening now, they might think, well, we tried this sort of capitalistic approach to the economy, and it's resulted in us being able to buy less food and vegetables for our money. The price has gone up at the pumps. People are struggling. It seems that inequality has widened, and the working class seem to be struggling more now than ever before. They can't buy homes anymore, like my parents or my grandparents could have. So clearly we need socialism, they would argue, because the current system has not worked.
Well, what we have now is socialism for the very rich. We have governments that are actively redistributing wealth from the working class to the very, very wealthy. And that is why we see record inequality. Government is actively intervening in the economy to forcefully redistribute wealth up the chain.
Up the chain?
Absolutely. And there are countless examples of it. When they block home building with heavy regulations, they limit the supply of homes. Those who have mansions, therefore, are richer because their houses are worth more. But young people, newcomers, working class people can't actually get a home. That is one example of state intervention. Well, we could maybe do an illustration here.
Okay, so this is the total amount of land in Canada.
Yes.
Where homes could be built. And actually,
Yes.
this is quite reflective, I think, of much of the Western world,
Yes.
even the UK. And this is a penny.
Yes.
Do you understand this demonstration?
Yes, I think what you're trying to say is that this is about how much land we live on.
Yes.
Yes. So Canada is a great example of this because we have 10 times as much land per person as the second closest G7 country. And yet we have the fewest homes per capita to live in. And why is that? It's because that the vast majority of the cost that goes into building a new home is not land, labor, or lumber. It's government. It's government taxes, fees, charges, bureaucracy, lobbyists, consultants. So if you think of this home here in Canada, when you buy this house, more of the money for your purchase would go to bureaucrats in office buildings than to the carpenters, electricians, and plumbers who actually build the home.
Why? How?
Because the bureaucracy has grown like any organism in nature, which seeks to survive and multiply. They give us the second slowest building permits of any country in the OECD. They charge enormous development taxes, which started out just to pay for plumbing and roads for the related housing, but now have grown into just a huge cash cow for local governments because sales taxes still apply on most new homes. And all of that gets sponged up by government and means that we have extremely expensive housing. In fact, we are the most expensive in the G7, even though it should be dirt cheap to own a home in Canada because we have the most dirt to build on. And my goal is to remove all of that bureaucracy, have the fastest permits in the world, and make it tax-free to build homes so that everyone can afford one.
I was reading some stat that said, again, I might butcher this a little bit, but it said that Canada needs to build between roughly 450,000 new homes every single year until 2035.
Yes.
Just to restore affordability.
That's right. And we're building about 240,000 per year. So we need to roughly double our home building to do that. The good news is we have 100,000, well, it's not good news. We have 100,000 unemployed construction workers who'd be happy to pick up a hammer and start building. We have hundreds of billions of dollars of investment that's ready to do it. We have an abundance of land. What we need are fast permits and low taxes so that we can unlock that building.
What is the case for slow permits?
There isn't one.
There isn't one?
Zero. There is no benefit to having slow permits. They do not protect the environment. They do not protect public safety. We used to build houses a lot faster and they didn't fall down. After the Second World War, permits were almost instantaneous. We had a massive buildup of homes so that our returning veterans could have a place to live. In many neighborhoods of Canada, those homes are still standing. They have not collapsed. I'm not saying we get rid of building codes. They should all have to follow standards of environmental responsibility and be fire resistant and safe. But it shouldn't take 7 years to approve a subdivision to do that. We know how the developers know how to build according to the rules. They just need quick permits and freed up land to do it.
You'd think now with AI, you'd be able to approve these permits within minutes.
Like with all the technology, housing should be so much cheaper than it was before. In fact, everything should be so much cheaper. But this is another area where government is redistributing wealth from the working class to the super rich. It's the monetary inflation where we're creating cash at a far faster rate than we're creating the stuff that cash buys. We've, in Canada, increased the number of homes over the last 10 years by 13%, but we've increased the money supply by 100%. In other words, there is now the growth in the money supply is 8 times faster than the growth in the housing supply.
Which means for the average person
that it bids up the price. Now, you might say, well, if everybody's equally getting their share of that money, then who cares? But they're not. there's something called the Catalan effect, which is that the first people to touch the money in a monetary expansion are those who are already wealthy and already connected to the financial system. So when government creates cash to fund its deficits, it doesn't just dump the bills out of an airplane into a suburban neighborhood. It injects it into the banking system by buying government bonds at inflated prices. And those who trade in those bonds are the first to get the cash. Those connected to the financial system are the first to borrow it. They get to deploy it before it loses its value. By the time it trickles down to the working class people, it's lost its value and their wages have been destroyed. And this has been happening on and off throughout all of human history, but it's been particularly bad in the last 55 years. And that is why I think the working class across the Western world is so angry.